I just knew that for the sake of my family and my kids and my relationship with my kids, that I had to shift my mind and work on things that were positive and not negative. You know, there's a lot of songs I was working on and just the environments I was working on that they weren't uplifting. They weren't positive. And so if you're just around negativity too much and then you go home, I'm being short with my kids. I'm not pouring into them. I'm not being a good father and a good husband. And to me, it was like, okay, I really, really felt the nudge, which was the Holy Spirit saying, the artist isn't your provider. God's your provider.
All right. Well, today I'm sitting with someone who's quietly helped shape records that you've probably heard, whether you realize it or not. Thomas Toner is a producer, songwriter, creative force behind the scenes, and has an awesome golf green in his studio. Um, he's worked with Jelly Roll and a wide range of artists across genres. But what I'm really interested in today isn't just the credits, as impressive as they are. It's the evolution of the producer's role. Thomas and I have talked just about the industry in general, and I love the way he thinks and wanted to share that with you guys today. So, man, we're going to talk industry, and Thomas is a man navigating faith like all of us, creativity, and the ever-changing Wild West that is the music industry. So, Thomas, I'm really glad you're here, man. Thanks for
Yeah,
taking the
dude.
time.
Thank you, man. Really, really appreciate it, man. Honored. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, let's start at the beginning of your story. I was wondering earlier, what's the earliest memory of wanting to make music for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. My earliest memory of wanting to make music was probably, when I discovered Blink 182 when I was a kid. So I had like two older sisters, and one of them was into like hip hop, like Jay-Z, stuff like that. The other one was into like Blink 182, Incubus, like rock stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember as a kid, I would sneak their CDs and steal from their binder of CDs and just listen to music because we kind of grew up in like a Christian home that was kind of, I would say, strict a little bit as far as like what music we were allowed to listen to. But
Me too, actually.
yeah, yeah.
Similar. Yeah.
My sisters were like a good bit older than me, so they were, in high school when I was a little kid, and so when I heard like Blink 182, the drummer Travis Barker, I was like, man, this is sick, and so I took an interest in playing drums, and drums was my first thing, so it wasn't even on my mind of like recording at that point. But once I got to high school, I had a friend in high school who like made beats, and so then I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I can do something with my rhythmic ability. And so I was like making beats and then, but listening to all kinds of music. I remember like when I discovered Under Oath, seeing that drummer, Aaron Gillespie. I was like, oh, this is sick because he wasn't like so overly technical, but he was so solid and good that it like just really inspired me to like, oh, I want to play with other people and make music with other people. He's insane, and he's just one of my earliest like inspirations of like playing drums.
Yeah, dude. That's
But
awesome.
yeah, yeah,
He's so iconic too, his look.
yeah, yeah, totally, yeah, yeah. So like high school was pretty much when I started like bringing it to the computer of like, okay, I downloaded like Mixcraft. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It was like an early free recording DAW basically, and started recording my friends and stuff. Had like rapper friends or whatever I could find that wanted to like experiment on music. So yeah.
Travis Barker, man, like how iconic.
Yeah. I think a characteristic of both him and Aaron is it was the first time that like the drums stuck out to me. Where like most of the time drummers are just playing with the song and you don't really want to be noticed, you're just accompanying everybody else. But they like came up with like parts, that were just so like unique and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's a musical instrument. It's not just banging on drums." So, yeah, it's like songwriting with drums, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And Travis, if I remember right, they're like Southern California,
Yeah, yeah, something like
which is
that.
where I'm from. Do you know where the Under Oath guys are from?
I don't know where they're from. I don't know where they're from actually. No, but I know that Aaron does live here. I mean, he lives in Spring Hill. We're friends on Instagram, and I never really told him what I just told you. Like, dude, you were like the drummer that made me want to like really, really play drums, you know what I mean? Um,
Dude, that will be awesome when you get to do that.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that'd be sick. I just, wanna play it cool, play it cool.
That's awesome. So and drummer, so you still play drums on a lot of the records you produce, if I
Yeah,
remember right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
When did you shift from musician or drummer though to producer?
Yeah, so basically, when I got out of high school, I really had no clue what I was wanting to do. I mean, I had started recording some friends or whatever, but I was still just kinda, like, making beats, and they were terrible. I was about to go to, like, music college because I don't know what to do. I'm not, like, super academic, I couldn't really get into, like, any great colleges, so I was about to go to, like, SAE, which is, like, a Nashville, like, certificate college,
Right.
And, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, she was, a nanny for, like, a Christian music producer. And this was like my intro into Christian music. And the only Christian music I know was basically like just church music or Christian radio, that my parents would play in the car.
Mhm.
And she gave him like a CD with a couple of beats on it. And by God's grace, he saw past the terrible beats and saw that, oh, he can actually do a little bit of something. There's some merit to the beats. So I interned for him and his partner for like 4 months. And then they hired me as their like studio engineer for like just under 2 years. And that was basically my college. I got paid to go to college basically. And that's, I was kind of like the studio rat. I did all the grunt work, but then I also got to engineer and program and edit. I did a ton of editing. And at the time, this was like 2010. In those 2 years, the top like 10 Christian records, they probably did half of them. And so it was like 10th Avenue North, it was Sanctus Real, it was guys like that. And I did, a lot of the engineering on a lot of that stuff. And that was kind of like my intro into like Christian music, but I didn't really have like any relationship with God. I mean, I definitely grew up around Christianity, but it was just kind of like
Hmm.
flowing through the motions. It was like, yeah, I'm a Christian, but that was it. It was like,
Mhm.
well, what does that even mean? Like what it just wasn't real basically.
Mhm.
And so when their partnership split up, they like let me go immediately. I was just back on my own. So I was kind of like burnt from Christian music. I felt, I mean, I was like 19, 20 years old. So I was kind of like, oh man, screw this. I'm never going to do Christian music again, which is funny. It's funny now. So then I just kinda, like, got normal jobs and, worked at, like, Panera and, like, random places, and then I met Jelly, and after meeting him, we just dove in full time. I had 1 kid at the time, and he was like, "Hey, man, how much do you need to pay your rent and to pay your bills?" And at that time, I'm like, "Oh, like $1,500, which is crazy. And he's like, "All right, I'm gonna make sure that's covered and just work with me full time." And I'm like, "All right, sure, let's do it." And I did it, and we hustled, man. We sold features, we traveled, we did all kinds of stuff, and kind of grew that for almost 10 years, and it kind of turned into something crazy. And we had parted ways at some point, not in a nasty way, but just in a we got to do separate things way. We
Uh-huh.
did other things for a while, and then we reconnected, worked again, and then we've been like basically brothers ever since. And so seeing his success is absolutely incredible. And it's not surprising. I mean, I saw it,
Mhm.
and here we are today. And so now I'm kind of 2 years back into Christian music in a sense. I mean, after I stopped working with him, I worked with another artist and found some success with him and just kind of built up my catalog. And then I kind of hit this wall of like, man, like what am I doing? Like I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was in the right place. I felt like a
Mhm.
nudge of just like, hey, I got to step away from this. And, I did that, and I've been kinda just pursuing songwriting. Kinda feels like a new career in a sense because I never really was like a lyric person.
Mhm.
And so I've just kinda started over, to be honest, and sometimes if it's tough thinking that. Not in the sense of like, I don't have anything going on, it's just more like I want to make great music, and I felt like, one area I was lacking was like, well, I got to learn how to write a song. You know what I mean?
Dude, so let's put a pin in that because I want to come back to all of that. I want to talk some more about that 10-year period when you were working with Jelly. But first, I want to just like backtrack to something you said when you were talking about the first time that you were working in Christian music, and it's okay if this is too personal and don't want to go here, but something you said kind of piqued my interest. You had said the thing about you were raised in church, but you didn't really have a relationship with God. And so my question is, and this is just something that I wonder about, and I have my own story about this in a way, but do you feel that if you're trying to make music that's, let's just call it Christian music, like trying to make music that's connecting God and people or worshiping God, and you haven't like subscribed to the God thing, do you think it's
Mhm.
just a recipe for jadedness? Like, do you think that makes a person jaded, or do you think there's a way to compartmentalize it as an unbeliever and still work in Christian music? What are your thoughts about that?
No, I think that's a really good question. For me specifically at that time, I wasn't like the creator of the music. I didn't write the songs. So I was just chasing like any education I could.
Mm,
But interestingly enough, fast forwarding to now, I've done a ton of writes in the last 2 years, and there's definitely a handful of people that I feel like I'm like, wow, it's interesting where I'm trying to surround myself with people who love Jesus and want to live like him. And I'm working with some Christian people that I'm like, oh man, like I'm not trying to judge them, but I question how much they actually believe what they're saying or
mm,
writing about.
mhm,
And I think to go back to originals, like, does it make you jaded? I definitely see how it could. I mean, I think some people can compartmentalize it if they're just trying to move up the ladder in a sense.
mhm,
But from the creation side of things, I really don't think that you can. That's tricky, man. That's tricky because I don't think me personally, I could really write a song that is really pulling people in to hearing from God without it actually being true in my heart. You know what I mean? Now maybe other people are such good songwriters that they can just write a song that grips people and they may not even believe it themselves. I don't know. Um, and I don't know if that's answering your question, but
no, it totally is. And I also love the distinction that I feel like is under the surface of what you're saying, because you talked about, do they believe what they're writing, not are they worthy? And I think some people
mm,
would hear this kind of conversation and just think like, man, you guys are kind of like coming off judgy. And you said you're not being judgy, but I've had a lot of these conversations in the past, like just in the studio or just one on one with people, or like even on socials or whatever. And I think that there's a distinction between, I am all in on this thing. I'm pursuing it. There's a lot I don't know, but with what I do know, I'm chasing God. And
yeah,
with that, there's also this gets a little theological, but the idea that when we put our faith in Jesus, he gives us this down payment of eternity called the Holy Spirit, and deposits the Holy Spirit into our life to guide us and lead us and give us almost this like unfair advantage of God's voice in our life. And but also a conviction of
yeah,
like, oh, you care about these things, so I guess I should too. And you didn't design life to be this way, so I guess I should avoid that. So there's this like definite like leaning in the direction of like, how can I honor you, God? Like, I wear your last name, so even in the way I work, in the way I like live, in the way I talk, the way I raise my family, like the addictions that I'm trying to recover from, like whatever it is, like I'm doing all that to honor you. So it is a little bit of a head scratch when you're just like, wait, like I'm in Christian music because I feel like I want other people to walk the journey that I'm walking, not because I see it as some sort of like industry platform or stepping stone to further my career. And obviously there's an industry and a career part and a business part. But
yeah,
anyways, I just feel like I love that you talked about it from a belief place, not a do we seem Christian-y? Because that's two different
right,
things. Like, who cares
yeah,
about that part? That's just aesthetics, and there's way too much fakery going on.
yeah.
But what we can't fake is if we actually believe this stuff. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah,
um,
no, I'm completely led by conviction. Like yeah, yeah. Like I know for me, as I've pursued God more, He's convicted me of the things that I need to change about myself. I
mm,
mean,
mhm,
um, And it's like, if people wonder who I've seen people wonder who maybe aren't or who are on the fence about God, and I think a lot of people who didn't grow up Christian, don't really wanna believe in God because they feel like, for the religious side of things and how you have to do this and you have to do that and all the rules and
Mhm,
all these kind of
mhm,
things, and for them, they're like, "Oh, do I have to stop doing this if I become a Christian or stop doing this?" And for me, it's like, the more I've pursued and prayed of like, what about myself do I need to change? The more I'm convicted of like, okay, you need to stop doing this, stop doing that. It's not a list of rules for me. It's really just the pursuit to live like Jesus did. Even though I grew up in a Christian home, like I feel like I'm still just a baby on the theology side of things because I didn't spend tons of years in the Word, and I know I'd pray in my head, but I wasn't actively trying to figure out Jesus. Like for me, it was always like, oh, God this, God that, and I feel the Holy Spirit, but what's Jesus's role? I had to like
mhm,
really figure that out. And I seeked wisdom from some Christian men, and just told them like, "Hey, like I understand the story of Jesus, but like why are we worshiping Jesus and not God? Or how is he separate? Like I didn't understand like the Trinity, you know what I mean?
mhm,
And bringing back into songwriting, like there's no way I can get in some of these rights that are Christian rights if I don't know what we're writing about, like I can't just make it up, And so for me, I've always been to a fault. Like I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like if I'm having a bad day or if I'm frustrated, like you'll know pretty quickly. It's really hard for me to put on a face, and
mm,
that's kind of one of the
mhm.
reasons I haven't been too industry like. I've always been more behind the scenes and to myself and stick in the studio. It's just like, I don't schmooze really. And so when I've been getting into these Christian rights, at first it was really hard because I didn't quite know the language as I thought maybe I did.
Mm, mhm.
And so I didn't have a lot to add to the rights from a lyrical or from a concept perspective because I'm still just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, dude. Well, when we first met, it was through a writing session. And just so you know, one of the things that was so endearing about you is just how genuine you were. Like, I instantly picked up, okay, this guy's not a schmoozer, which I really, really loved. And second, I'm kind of jealous of what you were describing as like a childlike faith. Like, there's a lot of the theological stuff that after all these years, I'm trying to undo. And
Mm,
I really do feel like there's a reason, and I'm kind of preaching here. I don't mean to, but there's a reason Jesus was saying, like, he like held a child in his arms and said, like, unless you're like one of these, you can't inherit the kingdom. Because I think
mm,
sometimes we just like put our faith more in what we know than who we know. I want to keep it about the main things and be more of a baby, if that makes sense.
yeah.
I appreciate that genuine side of you. Let's go to that 10-year period when you started working with Jelly Roll. You talked about how you guys connected, but so working together, what did you learn about what makes an artist producer relationship work?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, chemistry is crazy. And that's kind of one thing that I don't know if struggle is the right word for it. It's kind of overused, but one thing I'm figuring out now, especially getting into writes with people that I don't know a lot of the time, chemistry is like so important. I mean, yes, you can get in a room with three strangers and write a great song, totally possible. But from the artist producer relationship, we just kind of hit it off right away. So over time, just building that trust with each other of not questioning each other. So he wrote all the lyrics. I mean, and there'd be times where I maybe have suggestions, or if there was something I didn't like or heard a change, I could easily present that. But he was primarily writing most of the lyrics, and I would assist with like some melody stuff and arrangement and ideas and stuff. But then he would leave and and just let me do my thing. You know what I mean? And take what he did and produce around it and work with it. And so first thing that comes to mind is just chemistry. And that's hard to establish with people. And it's also hard to know if you're going to have chemistry with somebody. You might be friendly with someone or get along, but musical chemistry is a little bit different. I mean, Jelly and I have gone multiple times where maybe there's a year or two where we haven't talked to each other, and then as soon as we get together, there's no time lost, you know? And I have other friends like that, and those are the best friendships, you know, where there's no guilt of like, "Oh, I haven't talked to you in forever," or "Where have you been, man? You're a stranger." None of that, you know, like, it's the ones that you can just pick right back up with. And so, yeah, first is chemistry and, trust, you know? That's gotta be the primary answer to that, I think.
Yeah, like, was that like a time when you realized, man, some of my role is making sounds, but some of it is therapist, editor, coach at times,
Yeah,
like kind of wearing multiple hats. Like, I guess
totally.
when did you start to like realize that for yourself?
Yeah, I would definitely attribute a lot of that to Jelly and I because, there were a lot of you know, times where we would get in the studio and just talk a bunch. And that's primarily what we did. I mean, he wrote so fast that the actual recording time, it was very minimal. It was us mostly just hanging out.
Right.
And most of the time, people will say now in sessions, like when they come over, you know, we talk for an hour before we do anything. And that's not me forcing it. It just typically happens. Now, from the technical aspect, I learned prior to Jelly. Because I had those 2 years in like a full studio, like learned everything, got to watch real producers. But most of those sessions were just straight up work. It was like if the artist was in, it was just those were session days. Those were they're just working. I mean, a little bit of hangout maybe at lunch or whatever, but it wasn't chill in the sense of like it was more structured, you know. And then moving with Jelly, it was much different because we hung out a ton, and also like did other roles as well. So I traveled with them. I brought a rig, you know, small, you know, mic interface computer. Went on tour with them a few times and kind of helped in other ways other than just recording as well. We would go. This was I'm starting to date myself, but it was like when we were printing CDs and stuff. So we would go to Atlanta and print, you know, 10,000 CDs and then 10,000 of the sleeves, the cover. So I would help with some of the design, the graphic design and putting the sleeves together. And then we would go hand them out. It was those days. I
Mm-hmm.
played a lot of roles in that. That's kind of where I was formulating like what kind of producer was I going to be, and then ever since then, I've just been kind of exercising that, you know?
Dude, what have you learned about protecting an artist's voice without imposing your own voice onto a song?
That's interesting. With Jelly specifically, I didn't have to worry about that because his voice was so strong. His character came through. If he walked in the room, everyone looked at him. You know what I mean? Now, that's a little different now with writing with people. And actually, so yesterday, for example, I was in a write and you know, when you kinda hit a little bit of a wall in a sense, and you're trying to figure out whatever the next line is or whatever, and my instant go-to is like, "Okay, well, forget every idea that we've just said, like, what do you feel?" You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've learned too that, like, I can have my opinion and I can be opinionated for sure, but I if that's not their heart or their idea, my opinion doesn't matter because it's their song, and
Mm-hmm.
if they don't like whatever that part is, like, they're not gonna cut it, you know what I mean? So I'm pretty good at that in the sense of, like, I don't really steamroll. Um, I've definitely been in some sessions where one of the writers might be the steamroller and flowing with ideas, but kind of, like, persistent with their idea, like, "Oh, no, this is the idea." And that's not really my character, so I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I typically have too much of a problem with that, hopefully.
Do you remember a defining session that changed how you produce? Like whether with Jelly or some other time in your life?
I think the last 2 years has changed how I produce. Prior to that, I was kind of in one mode, and now that I'm kind of just in this search mode of writing with almost whoever, I'm a little bit more I like to call myself the Walmart Rick Rubin because I like to, have a
That's
hands-off
hilarious.
approach, you know what I mean? I almost wanna touch the song as little as possible,
Hmm.
and I know not a lot of producers would probably say that. I'd rather just use my mind, and I love the sessions where I can just be the thinker. That's when I feel like I shine the most.
Hmm. What does that mean to be the thinker for you?
So, I was just talking to my wife about this yesterday. So, yesterday's session, I won't say names, but it was a good session. But there's the artist who's a writer and a singer, and then there's 2 other people that are both writers, lyrics and melodies, you know? And one of them can play, like guitar, but the other 2 can't, and then there's me. And I'm, like, very mediocre at keys. I was a programmer. I can play keys enough to kinda, like, get something, but I can't find all the amazing chords, you know what I mean? And I'm
Hmm.
definitely not a guitar player. And so, I typically try to have tracks, ideas before the session starts. That way, we have something going, some kinda cool vibe instead of absolutely nothing, you know? And I really, really, really work well with if there's one, like, multi-instrumentalist in the room. So I have a good friend, his name's Zach Garner. I work great with him. I have like 2 other guys that are similar where they can pretty much play anything that you ask them to play. You know what I mean? If there's one of those in the room and then the artist being like a lyric person, then I feel like that's a recipe for magic for me personally. I've been trying to find like my role in the writers' rooms because you got
Hmm.
to think like those 10 years with Jelly, it was just kind of me and him. And yeah, we would have collaborators come in or a guitar player come in or whatever. But it's primarily me and him. And then the other artists I worked with after that, it was only me and him. And so now shifting gears to multiple writers in the room, I'm noticing that with writing sessions, they're like, "Oh, we like this guy because he does this, this, this well," or he may not be that good at this, but he can really do lyrics or he can really do melody. So lately, it's been kind of important for me to kind of find what I'm good at and what I bring into the writing room. And that does kind of pressure me. I was telling my wife, like, man, like I either need to like take more piano lessons and just get really good at piano so that I don't have to rely on a musician. But at the same time, I also just could also be more picky with the rights that I take or have more control over who else is I'm writing with, because there's sessions that are just magical that didn't depend on me for all of the track side of things. And it
Hmm.
sucks because sometimes I'm looked at as the track guy, which is fine. But I feel like my instinct and my gut is what I feel like I'm best at. And aside from like engineering and vocal producing and saucing, making things sound good, like that's a given for me. But I really want to be in a place eventually where I can just be in the session and just use my brain. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and not have to rely on tracks or me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. That's really good. I mean, that's really helpful for me to hear, like just your process and thinking through that. I feel like you've put words to some of the things I've felt for a while. It's so hilarious you mentioned Walmart Rick Rubin.
Yeah. Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
Rick Rubin is like one of my production heroes, dude. I mean, not just his amazing resume, but like his approach. So, since we're talking about Rick Rubin, what do you think separates a good producer from a great one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a great producer doesn't have to play everything. Quincy Jones, Rick Rubin, And that's speaking of, I'm jealous of producers that can play everything. You know what I mean? I spent years being a drummer, then I was the engineer for so long that I'm late on trying to play every instrument. And there are times where that's kind of made me feel like that's a hindrance of some sort. But then I just remind myself that that's not my strong point. I think a great producer has great instincts, knows what he likes, but also pulls the best out of other people and creates a space in the studio that allows people to be comfortable and enjoy making the music that they're making and make
Hmm.
it not feel like work. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I would say those are some attributes I would consider a great producer.
This feels like a great segue to just talk about the role of production today and in the future.
Mm.
I think artists listen to this, and I'm wondering, what do you think that artists misunderstand the most about producing, about working with the producer, about what producing is for their success?
What do they most misunderstand about producers? That's a good one. That's a tricky one, man. That's a tricky one. We'd have to ask an artist. My instinct answer would be I think the thing they misunderstand is that they care more than they probably think. I hear sometimes artists, I don't know if it's complaining, but saying comments about other producers that they've written with that either are too stuck in their own opinion, or they're just there to just hit the buttons. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Might be true for some people. I think artists misunderstand that producers have a pretty vital role. I mean, I've definitely seen some artists undervalue the producer
Hmm. Interesting.
and undervalue. the contribution to the writing. I mean, it's interesting, in hip hop, in rap music, like, if I make a beat and you rap on it, like, we're 50-50 writers of the song. But in every other genre, for some reason, like, that's not the case. You know, like, if I create the track and the artist writes the song to the track, it's like, no, they wrote the song. You know what I mean? And I find that interesting because it's different. That's something to have gotten used to, which is kind of a big reason why I don't make quite as many tracks as I used to. I'll kind of just make little starter ideas of like just like kind of a vibe to just see if like that's the direction we want to go. But the days of like building a track, spending all day on a track, and then like trying to pitch it as something like that is inexistent for me.
Hmm.
I would say artists misunderstand and undervalue the producer's perspective sometimes.
Yeah, dude, that's really, really good. You're right. Like even in Christian music or worship specifically or whatever, um, it's still thought of as like a lyric and a melody,
Yep.
which I get, and I love that side of it, the melody and the lyric side.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as a producer, I'm with you. It's like often either a producer is just like treated as, yeah, 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 you're going to contribute everything after we leave,
Right.
or thought of as, yeah, you're here to just record a vocal and push buttons.
Yeah.
Stay in
Yeah.
your lane. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of writers still think that way. Like, I'm here to be the lyricist. You're here to push buttons. So put your headphones back on and shut up, you know,
Yeah. Totally.
which is really
Yeah.
frustrating when you have a lot more to add.
Yeah. Dude, I love the business side of things. I'm like 50% creative, 50% business. We could talk for 2 hours about the business side of things because it is super interesting. Like just like what you said, Christian music specifically does feel semi behind on some aspects of the business. And not necessarily behind, but just operating in an older way where the rules have kind of changed now, kind of just catching up a little bit. And I think AI will change some of that. Also, I think newer labels that are starting to give master splits to writers is going to change some things. I've already done that on my own personal stuff that I'm writing that's not part of a label because that's where things are going. And I'm always trying to figure out, like, be forward thinking and figure those things out. So when I'm working on like developing an artist, so aside from like writing and stuff, I usually pick like 2 or 3 artists that are smaller that I really believe in that I choose to like work on, either for very cheap or for free for a larger back end percentage, but also because you know, saw where Jelly was going to go. 1 or 2 other artists I was able to catch on before their wave as well,
Mhm.
and I feel like I have a little bit of an ear for that, and I love just working with talented people, and so I'll find an artist or 2 that I believe in and kind of executive produce for them. So meaning I'm kind of acting as the label in a sense, and so when I'm doing that, I'm handling like distribution. We're agreeing on splits. Where I like to give writers master splits, and I'd love to dive into that sometime. We don't have to do it this time, but
We
um,
absolutely should this time. Yeah.
okay.
Let's do that a little bit, and whether it's now or in a minute or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. And I just think that that's where things are going, but the labels aren't cool with that. You know what I mean? Christian labels, especially, you know, they'll give a producer 3% and kind of act like, hey, you should be stoked for that. You know what I mean? Because we gave you $2,000 that you have to repay back. You know what I mean? And so it's just funny because I understand from a business perspective why that makes sense for them, and that's their model of how they've made money. So why change it? Because there's plenty of producers who maybe haven't had success who are on the come up, and so they're more than willing to take $2,000 and 3%. Um, but wouldn't you rather take um, $2,000 not recouped and make 10%? And you can do that. You just have to negotiate and you can do that on an independent level, no problem. Most independent artists are more than happy to give you larger master percentages, especially if they're not paying you as much on the front because you're believing in them. You're taking the risk. I'm going to work hours and hours on this song. A writer might come in. So like my buddy Zach, I'll pay him a couple $100 for the write, but then I'll still give him 5, 7%, you know, of the master because he's only had to work that one day, and then maybe he'll cut something at his house and overdub something to me later, but I'm gonna work on that song for months, you know? So I should get more than 5%. I should get, 10, 15, 20% sometimes, especially if it's a small artist who doesn't have a lot of streams. Like, even if I take 50%, which I don't take lion shares, but even if I were to take 50%, it would take me multiple years to make back a fee that I would charge them to produce the song. And
Mhm.
so, I'm lucky to be able to be in a position to be able to do that. But at the same time, I can't only do that, or else I'll never be making any money. So I try to spend like 25% of my time on development, because if it one, it's music that I have more creative input on, and so it's more fulfilling, and also it's I believe in it. So
Hmm.
if I put some time into it now, I'll have ownership on that forever. So you'll have to stop me, because I could talk about the business side all day long.
Dude, I love it. And I think there's people that are listening to this, both artists and producers. Can we go back to your hypothetical numbers? You talked about the percentage versus like the $2,000. But and then you said, okay, you could take a smaller fee and then do something like 10% or 15%. Like, how do artists and producers navigate that together? If they're used to the other system or something and they're just starting with this, how would you recommend they have those conversations?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would say with a label, that's where it's a little bit tricky, because if they don't already have a relationship with you, or they trust what you're going to do, and maybe you don't have the clout. So like some of the more OG producers could probably get away with changing up deals. But if you're kind of a newer producer or something, they might just kind of laugh at you if you say, "Oh, hey, I want 10% instead of 3." I mean, the labels are less willing, especially the more established labels are less willing to bend on their numbers. There are newer labels that are newly established that are much more forward thinking
Mm.
with deals, and they're starting to give writers some master percentage, which I completely agree that they should, even if it's just a little bit. Because side note, really quick, like, being a songwriter only is really, really tough to make money, because you're dependent only on publishing. You're not getting mechanicals, you're not getting producer points, you're not even getting an upfront fee. So you showed up to the right for free and hoping that the song is going to make it on radio or stream really well before you see any money. So I believe that writers should share in the master percentage as well. It only makes sense. You made the song together. They should get a little bit, even if it's a couple percentage or five or whatever. It has to be the label willing to take 80% instead of 94% or whatever. You know what I mean? Now, are they willing to do that? Most of the time, no. And I, as a producer, don't want to be trouble to the labels. So all the label stuff that I've worked on, especially, have mostly been artists that are friends of mine. And so if they say, "Hey, here's the deal we're offering," more times than not, I'll just take it, because
Mhm.
it's not worth coming off as difficult or whatever. Now, if it's something I really would want to fight for, I mean, one of the main things that I have kind of pushed back on is just recoupment. I struggle with recoupment for some reason. I don't know why. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm.
Because you're like, I've spent weeks or months on the song. Like, that time should be covered a little bit. And then when the song comes out, we should just make money from point A, you know? And even if you want to give me a little bit less percentage, that's fine. But I shouldn't have to wait till my percentage made 2,500 or 2,000, whatever it is, before I start making pennies after that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I would say from a label standpoint, that's going to be a little bit tricky. If it was easy, everyone could do it. You know what I mean? But from an independent standpoint, I tell producers lots of times, like, "Hey, like, if you're not struggling to pay bills, or maybe one artist you work with that you believe in, do it for free. Like, but take a bigger chunk. And the artist is going to be willing to do that more times than not, because
Mhm.
you're believing in them, you're investing your time, and you're saying, "Hey, let's make something together and let's share in it more equally." That makes sense. I don't want
Absolutely.
to ever take like a lion's share from an artist. I've actually seen producers do that. I don't ever want someone in the future to look back and be like, "Oh my gosh, like, Thomas took 70% of that song. That's crazy." Like something like that. I always want to be fair. So mostly I try to aim for like 80-20, or 85-15, or just kind of depending on the song, like how much work it's going to take me to do it.
Mhm.
And then also sharing in some of the expenses of the song. So because I don't play everything, I'm usually going to hire at least one person to play something. I can program, I can play keys, I can play a little bit of bass, but I'd rather hire my bass player who's way doper than me and give him 75 bucks. You know what I mean? So do I pay for that or does the artist pay for that? You kind of have to figure out those kind of details. But
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where things are going and where splits are going, as opposed to kind of like just the traditional, the traditional standard stuff,
Yeah, man. What are some other business things just off the top of your head that either artists or producers or both need to be thinking about, or in your opinion, are missing out on now that would just be good to put on their radar?
Sure. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me was making sure your catalog is organized. So I always did my
Mm.
own admin. I don't have an admin deal or a publishing deal. I mean, I have a few on the table and one in particular I'm actually considering, but prior my whole 15 years I've been doing this, I did all my admin. And it's funny because in all the early Jelly years, we didn't have a clue what publishing was. And so we didn't figure it out until it already had become successful. And so it was kind of a mess trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what are splits and what's publishing and what's mechanical and all that stuff. So for me, a year ago, I sold a big chunk of my catalog. And a couple years prior to that, I really worked hard to get my catalog organized. A big part of that is making sure everything is registered in every possible way that it could be registered. So there's 4 or 5 ways you can earn from a song. And most like producers are only doing 1 or 2 of those. They'll either get their BMI, their publishing, or their share on the master, which is usually like in the form of a split on a distributor online. But there's also mechanical royalties. There's also sound exchange. There's
Mhm.
there's 4 or 5 different things that can really increase your income. The songs are making money that you don't even realize that they're making, especially if they're
Mhm.
streamed halfway decent. So I think registering everything, getting all your admin, and also having contracts in place. Now that is kind of a tricky thing because especially if you're friends with people, like contracts can get messy and weird. And I always did like very simple homey contracts where it's like 1 or 2 pages and it's just like plain language, no fluff, nothing crazy. And those hold up. Now you want to be careful not to leave certain things out if you think it's going to be a problem in the future. But if you have good relationships with those people, I always give people the benefit of the doubt. And if they screw me over once, then I know it. And I can react to that. But most
Mm.
people hopefully have genuine hearts and stuff. So you can get away with doing kind of simple contracts, but they're important to have. The paperwork. Unfortunately, it's the music business. We can't all just be creative all the time. It's so important.
Yeah, dude. So since you were independent for 15 years, what are some just hacks that you learned over time that those folks who are administrating their own, not just publishing, but like masters, all of this stuff? Any hacks that they should be aware of that you learned?
I don't know if this is a hack, but one thing that's super important is if you're going to get master splits from somebody, make sure that it's going through a distributor that gives you an online split. I mean, there was an artist I worked with for a couple
Mm.
years and we had gained some traction. And at the time, TuneCore, I'm not sure if they do now, but TuneCore didn't do splits. I had to rely on their manager to do monthly reports, you know, and turned out they weren't accurate. They weren't right. And
Mm.
so I think it's very important, just for the sake of everyone just being on the same page, to have splits being done by a third party. And so there's multiple middle of the line distributors that will take a percentage, but there's also DistroKid, where if I upload a song, like, okay, Sam gets 15%, I put in your email and you're now getting 15%, and you never have to come to me or you never have to go to the artist. So I think that is like super important.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about AI. I know it's like one of
Nice.
your favorite topics right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dude, is AI a tool, a threat, noise? What's your opinion on all that?
It's definitely noise and it's definitely a tool. I don't look at it as a threat. I love this part because I feel like there's going to be people very far on one side of the fence and very far on the other. This is a very divisive thing. I have people that I follow on Instagram who, post things like, if you use AI, like you're a terrible producer or something. It's like, and I laugh at stuff like that. And what I think they mean is generative AI. So like recently when in Christian music, there was the Christian artist who was an AI artist who was at like the top of iTunes. And that song was completely generated. Now I don't know if the producer of that wrote the song first or whatever, you know? And what I mean by that, if people don't know, is like you can just type in CCM soul Americana folk prompt and then make up lyrics. Like it'll just make up lyrics for you and it'll make up the melody, it'll make up the track, and then boom, you've got a song that sounds pretty dang good, right? And then they upload the song and like, this is my song. Okay. That is not cool, right? Like that, I feel like that is cool in the sense of like, oh, that's a cool trick, but that's not, I don't think that's going to really get anywhere. I think it's kind of a cool, funny thing that people do. But at the end of the day, like humans will always be needed in music. And
Mm.
music is a universal language. It has to be human. So we can add tools to it. I mean, AI to me reminds me of when Autotune came out. It reminds me of like I'm not this old, but I remember when I first got into it, I would hear producers say, "Oh, I remember when Pro Tools came out. Everyone thought, "Oh man, the computer's doing the work for you." You know what I mean? And now no one says that about Pro Tools, you know? And so for me, I use AI in two ways. One, for demos. So when we write a song, we wrote the chords, we wrote the arrangement, we wrote all the lyrics, all the melody. The session's over, we recorded a guitar and a vocal. We'll throw it in and we'll have it create a semi finished sounding version of the song. And that's for listening purposes. Like we're not going to put that out. We're not going to claim that this is our production. We're just going to listen to like, oh, this is what it could sound like. And then maybe if we want to change it to a different style, we can without me having to spend 3 days working on the song.
Hmm.
It's our song created by humans, right? And then the other way I've used it is if I've produced a song in full, completely on our own, and I need a choir. Now, for a label situation, they have a budget for that. Okay, great. Let's pay for the choir. Let's go record them. That's awesome. I'd rather have a real choir. We can control every aspect of it. But for this other artist that I worked with, Nate Moore, who's an incredible singer, he was in House Fires. We did a record where at the very end we're like, oh, we need more background vocals, but I had already spent a little bit on the song and I'm like, dude, I don't really want to spend more money on the song. And so we got a choir, and it's tucked in there and it's in the song and it sounds incredible. Like I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that. I don't feel less of a producer. I don't feel less creative by doing that. And I think it's gonna go in a lot of crazy places. Like I can hear fully generated songs like that because I've listened to them plenty. So I don't really think it's gonna replace all of our jobs, and everyone's gonna have different uses for it. But for me, like especially on the demo side of things, like I'm not about to spend 4 or 5 hours in a write and then spend a couple of days of my time and possibly money working on a demo, sending it to the artist and the label and like, "Oh, that sounds great," and then never hear from them again.
Mhm,
You know what I
mhm.
mean? No one's paid me for that, and I just wasted so much time. You know what I mean? And so, that's why I've used it, and that's totally fine, and I respect that people don't wanna use it. Great.
Are there times when you put more elbow grease into something? Like you believe in it in a certain way? If so, how do you determine that?
I'm figuring that out. Because, and even for an example, like, and we don't have to say names, but our first write together, I put some elbow grease into that song. I thought it sounded pretty good, at least as a starting point of like, hey, this is kind of like we could go from here, we could take it from here, we can produce it further. But
Mhm.
I kind of semi-produced the demo and it hasn't been cut, and that's fine. I'm not bitter about it, but it does kind of give me data points of like, okay, like they seemed really stoked about the song. So that's why I put more time into it. So generally, we can kind of like guess, like,
Right.
is this a song we should kind of sit on for a little bit? Maybe we rewrite, or if we're leaving the session like stoked about the song, then like I'm like, sure, I'll put some time into it, no problem. But after a couple of those of doing that, and then them just kind of sitting. But side note, I'm also kind of learning too, like my pacing is a little bit different than everybody else. Like, with the artists I worked with before, a couple of artists I worked with before, and then Jelly prior to that, like almost every song we ever worked on, we would put out more than 9 out of 10. It's like rare to have a song that we would work on and then like not put out.
Mm.
And
Right.
not only did we put them out, but we put them out pretty quickly. So like if we did a song, like it's probably going to come out in the next couple months tops. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was just used to that for like 15 years. And then all of a sudden I'm in Christian rights for 2 years where I've got songs that I've been sitting on for those whole 2 years. But then I talked to um, and older producers who have been in it a little bit longer than me, especially on the Christian side, like Chris Stevens. He was telling me about a song that he had for 9 years that just got cut with like Keith Urban or something, and it's like, so I have to remind myself, like, okay, I need to slow down. Maybe I need to be okay with them sitting in limbo for a little bit. But that's hard because I'm like passionate about the songs, and especially if we're like stoked on the song, I'm like, all right, let's go, let's record, let's do this, let's do that, and let's plan. Like, when you want to put it out, like it's summertime, let's do it.
Yeah.
Gauging whether I put elbow grease into it or not. Like, I'm figuring that out. I'm figuring
Yeah,
that out.
absolutely. Did you watch that Peter Jackson documentary about the Beatles? It was like the 10-hour one.
No, but I've heard about it.
Okay. If you go back and watch the documentary, anyone listening, you'll see this. They would record something, and even if it was multiple takes of something, then they'd go to dinner or to, hang or just leave for the day. And the engineer would just mix the song,
Mm.
and then if they liked it, it was done. I mean, if they came back
Yeah.
and they were like, it wasn't this process that we do sometimes pre-production, and then we're going to record vocals, and then I'm going to send it to my editor, and then you'll approve the production at some point, and after some tweaks, we'll send it out to whoever the mixing engineer is, and it's this whole process of whoever
Yeah.
that's going to be, and then once the mix revisions are done, then we'll send it out to mastering, and then once that's done, we have a 6 or 8 week lead, and we're gonna do marketing and blah blah blah. And I think,
Uh,
as much as I'm like all about, maybe it's that I enjoy the process of that in some ways,
uh,
but there's also times when I'm like, you know what, the rough from the day we wrote the thing, and
mhm.
there's a magic and it kind of reminds me of that
Yes.
thing before there was decades of industry to like learn from. It was just people making music. It's almost like we know too much or something. And we're
Yes.
playing this comparison game of it needs to sound like this other song. It's almost like we're trying to make stuff other people have made rather than just feel something and print it, you
So,
know?
how do you deal with that though? Because I could not agree with you more, and I think that that's like one of my main gripes of Christian music is it's a little overthought, and especially with music that's supposed to be felt, and that's kind of one of my things is just like the processes are just so drawn out, and there are some elements of that I do enjoy, and I understand what you're saying, but how do you handle that?
So I don't know that I handle it very well. I think at the end of the day, as producers, we're advocates for the artist or the group or the church or
Yeah.
whoever it is that we're working with. And so there is an element, and I think, guys like us who also are creatives ourselves and easily could make our own albums sometimes struggle to separate between your album versus the album I want you to make or something. And
Right, right.
and so sometimes it's just like regrouping to remind myself, like, how do I advocate for them and their voice and their vision? So first of all, and then second, understanding their goal, understanding their aim and their audience. And so I think for better for worse, we're standing on the shoulders of decades upon decades of how Christian music has been made, which was standing on the shoulders of how maybe country music was made or other genres made music in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And I think some of that has been held on to, and some of those reasons are good. Maybe if they're not good, they're understandable.
Sure.
And that an audience has come to expect a certain thing. And radio has been one of those things. Radio
Uh,
has been one of those things where it's just like for this audience on this platform with these program directors,
yeah.
it kind of has to be in this box or it's
Right.
not gonna work for this thing.
Sure.
Now, why and who gets to decide that is a whole other conversation.
Sure. Right. Yeah, this is one of those things where like all these things can be true at the same time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we can have arguments for both sides. Like, one thing that stuck out you said was like the audience expects something. And we go back to like Rick Rubin where he says like the audience comes last.
Yes.
But in the world of like Christian radio, like the audience is first. And so, which is right. I mean, I think they both can be right. Now, should we make every song to sound like it should fit on Christian radio? Absolutely not. And I'm not the one to come to for that. And everyone who's written with me knows that that's the case. And it's so funny that people put me in like some of these like really down the center CCM rights, and I'm like, okay, let's do it, but I don't know if you're going to get what you're wanting, but let's try, because I try to just get outside the box. But I think all these things can be true at the same time. one element that we missed on that is like just the amount of opinions, you know?
Right.
Where it's like, oh, when me and Jelly wrote a song and we brought in a guitar player or whoever, like there's maybe 3 or 4 people involved, tops. And then now it's like, oh, we just wrote with 4 people. They have 2 managers, God knows why. Then they have the radio team and 2 A&Rs and then the head of the A&Rs and then the head of the label. And it's like, dude, we got 20 people that all have to agree on this song. That's never gonna happen. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's I think a key element to this too, is just like how many people are have an opinion on this song, you know what I mean? And that's kinda why
Absolutely.
I think it kinda gets funneled down to this, because it's like, this is what everyone can agree on. You know what I mean?
I think it's such a good point, what you just said about it being so subjective. Just going back to AI, what part of producing can AI never replicate?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's a great question. Because I really what the AI is doing is just compiling and averaging other people's ideas, human ideas, right? It's pulling from the songs that other people have inputted into it. And that's a big reason why people are against it, and I totally understand, because that makes a lot of sense. It's all the songs you put into it that you want it to recreate, it's pulling that data and, like, using that as an idea for something else, you know? And I think the obvious thing that it cannot create is the heart. I mean, is the human touch. And I think you're totally right, because I think, trends go in these loops, where like for the last like 10 years, like there wasn't really a lot of bands on the top 40, and then bands are starting to come back, or like rock's starting to come back, or like soul music is starting to come back, where it was kind of gone for a little bit, and things just kind of go in these cycles. So I think the AI, it's a wave where it's all. You asked me in the very beginning, like, is it just noise? I'm like, it totally is noise, because it's just so much happening all at once. It's so new. I think people's biggest gripe, I think, is just to see a song be at the top of the charts that isn't a real person. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's probably the thing that makes people mad the most, where it's just like, oh, that's not a real artist. I can't go to a show and see them. You know what I mean? And so, like, because I had I won't say his name, but it's a pretty predominant producer writer guy who loves AI and loves Suno, and he pulled up his Suno account. I mean, it's like thousands of songs, and he was like, "You should make an AI artist," you know? And at first I'm like, "Oh, I was kind of intrigued by that," because I have a lot of songs that I've written with other people that just didn't get cut, but they're really good songs. And like, who should put these out? He's like, "Oh, you should make an AI artist," you know? And on like surface level, I thought, "Oh, that's kind of a cool idea. Maybe it'll pick up some steam or make some money or something." But then I'm like, "But then what? Like, am I that artist now? Or, like, I have to make a complete persona of someone and pass that off as a real artist? Do I say, 'Hey, this is an AI artist,' or do I post it up and pretend that it's a real person?" You know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
and so I think that the biggest thing is just, like, it's just at the end of the day, it's not a real human, and music will always need the human touch. Even digital or even pop music that's all synths and all programmed, it still needs human touch. And so I am in the
Right.
firm believer that I don't think AI is gonna take over the way people are afraid that it's going to. I could be wrong, but my guess is that it's scary for people who, um, maybe rely on certain elements of music for income, that this might be taking away from them. But I don't see it. I don't see us 20 years in the future, like the top 10 artists in selling country are all like fake artists. Like I just don't see that happening. Maybe we'll play this in
Yeah.
10 years and I'll be completely wrong, but
I don't
I
know.
hope.
I all I can say is I hope you're right because I
Yeah.
think I'm hoping that there's an instinct in humans for connection. And obviously,
Yeah.
we have a track record as humans to settle for the plastic and the fake and the nipped and tucked, and
Yeah.
fake false intimacy in lots of ways.
Totally.
And yet, I mean, you can only eat donuts for so long, or cotton candy
Right.
before you're
Yeah.
like, I just have this like hankering for some meat and potatoes.
Yeah. Totally.
And so I'm hoping you're right that we just don't have an appetite to listen to computer generated songs, at least
Right.
100% computer generated songs. I'm
Right.
with you. I
Right.
think, as a producer, I've also experimented with how to make use, just like we use ChatGPT or Grok or something like that to research and to, you know, format articles or whatever it is that we're doing. I think musically, there's some really great time saving tools and even creative tools with AI. I think where what I get nervous about is that we lay down the
Mm,
discipline and we lay down the craft and pick up a lazy way of creating not good music. And
yeah.
I love what you said earlier in the conversation about even just how you feel your strength is as a producer is being that tastemaker.
Mm,
You know what I mean? That is a thing that I wonder as a producer, or at least I feel confidently as a producer, like that's actually my greatest asset because I could grab a beat off Splice or a loop somewhere. You know, the difference between just someone who doesn't know what they're doing with that loop and someone who does is like
mhm.
being able to utilize that to make something that moves people and something that
Yeah,
is just musically good, like that
right.
feels good, you know?
Totally,
And
totally.
so I think whether it's with AI or whether it's a sample or whether it's an instrument, knowing what to do with those things, you know, is important. Dude, so with all these things we talked about, AI, the role of a producer, just the music industry and artists and producers figuring out a whole new way of working together.
Yeah,
In your opinion, what does integrity look like in
yeah.
this industry?
I think with AI specifically, I think it's important to just be transparent, um, if you're gonna use it. Um,
Mm,
just because it could give people kind of a bad feeling if you're trying to pass it off that you didn't use it. You know what I mean? Or something like that. But just in general, not AI related, I think like integrity, I think is really important to just for me, just being the same with everyone that I talk to. I really try not to put on a face, and try to be someone that I'm not. I think that's kind of one
mm,
reason that most of the artists I've worked with, that I've had good chemistry, just respected the most was just that, like, I'm just the same in every room, basically. I try to be, and I
mhm,
think I think that's important, man, because I think AI and not AI related, I think people can really tell when you're just trying to be opportunistic or trying to gain favor with them by building a fake quick relationship with them. That's kind of like one reason I'm never much like a schmoozer going to like industry events and stuff because it's like to me, I'm like that just seems like I'm trying to force a relationship so that I can further myself, you know what I mean?
mm,
And maybe I've taken the longer road by doing that. Sometimes I think, "Oh, maybe I need to be more, approachable or more social," and that is something I'm working on just on my own self of just, like, working through um, depression things and just personal health things and like trying to be more social, more approachable. And I think I can do
mhm,
that without being fake or opportunistic. But I think it's just really important to just be yourself and just do good business. I think that's one thing people just forget sometimes is like I've been done wrong by people on like small things that kind of ruin the relationship. And I'm like, man, was that really worth it? And I
mm,
think
mhm,
especially in music business and this town specifically, people will say, "Oh, it's snaky," and yes, it is. But if you operate with a very integrity mind, I think it doesn't have to be, And I think if you're just honest and you do good business with people and you follow through and you keep your word, I think those are things that I try to do. I think nothing's more important than keeping your word. You know what I mean?
okay, hardest lesson that you've learned in this career?
Oh man. Yeah, that's good. Let me think. Let me just pause and think for a second.
Yeah, no rush.
I try to pause and think more. You've watched someone like Elon Musk, when you ask him a question, he sits there in silence for like 15 seconds before he answers a question. And it's like super awkward, but it makes total sense?
Yeah, rather than just making something up.
Yeah, yeah. I think some of the hardest lessons, maybe there's probably one or two. I think one of them was waiting too long to care about the business side of things. I was always so like concerned that if I was too businessy or if I asked an artist for a contract or even asked to be paid, that I'm gonna somehow put a bad taste on the relationship. And,
Mm,
but now I have no choice, man. I have 5 kids. I can't wait to ask anymore. You know what I mean?
mm,
I
mm,
think there's a way to do it tastefully and not awkwardly, and I think you
mm,
have to know your value and know your worth. And I think I waited too long to worry about the business stuff, that it took me those couple years of, like, catching up on all the things that I didn't concern myself with
Mhm.
early on. And it was mainly not because of ignorance, it was just, like, I just thought that the business side sucked. I didn't wanna have to talk about business with the artist. I wanted it to be fun and creative only, you know?
Mhm.
Um and that's easier to do with artists that you're more friends with, as opposed to just if you do a one-off right and you happen to produce for them, and that's great, and you don't really know them that well, then it's a little bit different. But I think that's one of the hardest lessons. And also just this one I struggle with because I don't regret doing it, but going all in with an artist is a really big risk. And what I mean by that is I had my Jelly era. I had another area with another artist that they were my main focus. And yeah, I did work with other artists during those periods, but it literally was like 90-10 or 80
Yeah.
20, where
Mhm.
it's like I'm spending all my time on one artist. And it paid off. It paid off. So I don't regret it. But I think it's something to be careful about. And it is a hard lesson. It's a harder road. It's
Mhm.
more it blurs the line of, like, early on, any headbutting that me and Jelly had was always because we were both emotionally invested in what we were doing. Looking back, I'm like, "Oh, I should have been more mature about certain things or not argued about certain things or whatever." But when you're just all in on an artist because you believe in it, it is a good thing, and it can pay off, but it's a harder route. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
As opposed to just, "Oh, I'll just be a producer, I'll just work with whoever, and I'll just make money, little bits and pieces by here. I'll charge this person. I'll charge." But instead, I was like, no, I'm just going to dive in. You know what I mean? I'm all in, you know? And at that time, like early on, especially when, like, because Jelly specifically at first was only a rapper, and
Hmm.
then kind of transitioned, started singing more choruses. And then by the end of our main chunk of time together, it was mostly all singing. And so there was a transitional period. And in the beginning, I would see other big rappers always had like a producer that was their main guy. They didn't work with a bunch of producers. They had one main guy who would travel with them, who would produce all their stuff. Drake, Wiz Khalifa, like all these big artists had a one producer. And I always saw that and I thought, oh, that's how you do it, because you're going to build together. There's no outside influence. And in a lot of ways, that is one way to do it. It's not the only way.
Mm.
But to answer the question in a more simpler form, I think being careful on who I choose to go all in with and making sure that they feel the same way. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's really good, man. Going back to like the beginning of our conversation, you had mentioned you were in Christian music, then you took a season away from that, and then now you're kind of back into making Christian music specifically. What shifted internally that led you back towards Christian music?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely something I wanted to speak about because it was hard to do. I was seeing success in these last prior to 2 years ago, last 4 or 5 years, um, and making good money, and I just felt like I was in a bit of a more toxic environment, and I just knew that for the sake of my family and my kids and my relationship with my kids, that I had to shift my mind and work on things that were positive and not negative. You know, there's a lot of songs I was working on and just the environments I was working on that they weren't uplifting. They weren't positive. And so if you're just around negativity too much and then you go home, I'm being short with my kids. I'm not pouring into them. I'm not being a good father and a good husband. And to me, it was like, okay, I really, really felt the nudge, which was the Holy Spirit saying, the artist isn't your provider. God's your provider. Like, I can't just, like, putting most of my eggs in one basket did pay off. So I'm not going to say don't put all your eggs in one basket, but there's a time when those things are over, and recognizing that. And I just really needed to change my life and change my circle. I mean, I always heard a quote of like, you're the average of the people that you surround yourself with. You know what I mean?
Mm, it's good.
And that's so true. And it's like what I tell my oldest son now that he's like starting to just hang out with more friends and stuff. And it's like, that's so, so true. So for me, I just needed to surround myself with people who spoke life into me and and spoke positivity into me because I
Mm,
need that. I mean, my instinct, I've always kind of dealt with depression and just senseless like sadness for no reason. And so if I'm left
mhm,
alone by that, or if I'm around people who are negative and not necessarily speaking life into me, then I just get even lower. And so I need to be around people who genuinely ask me how I'm doing or who will call and check up on me and stuff like that. And like I wasn't and an artist isn't supposed to be that person necessarily, but when you're all in with an artist, you're kind of best friends in a sense, you know?
mm,
And
mhm,
it just wasn't the right fit for me anymore, and so it was kinda tough to step away from. I was obviously making money from the songs previous, but to just put a stop to that and say, "Okay, hey, I'm gonna stop doing that, and I'm gonna learn how to write songs and get into songwriting," which is for free, like, no one pays us to write songs unless they get cut, you know? And so it was a little bit of a risk, and look, I'm 2 years into that, almost 2 years into that, and I'm still trying to figure out, like, "Okay, God, like, I did what you asked me to do, and I have some things going that I feel like are positive." Now, once you kinda reach a certain level of success at all, like, anything lower than that feels like, "Oh, I'm not doing good enough," or my songs aren't good enough, you know? So there are times where I'm like, "Oh, man, did I do the right thing?"
mm,
But
mhm,
I'm constantly affirmed that I did do the right thing, and I'm just kind of in this, like, waiting period of, like, okay, like, what's the next thing that I'm really gonna pour into, you know? I'm writing, I'm creating, I'm producing, I have work, this is great, no problem. I just got some presets and a plugin that I'm excited about. I have a couple, like, pub deal offers, like, I'm interested in that, trying to see if that's the right fit for me. So like things are happening like that are affirming me that I'm in the right direction, but it's just going slower than I imagined, than I'm used to in my fast-paced world. And so I'm in that period of like, okay, like what do I want to like really sink my teeth into? Because I really like to have a goal or like something that I know like an artist is like, okay, let's really build a sound, you know?
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's kind of like where I'm at with that.
I'm glad you mentioned the plugin. I was gonna ask you about that.
Let's
That
go.
was kind of a dream come true for you, right?
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, any producer is always going to want to see their name in a plugin. You know what I mean? And to have them approach me was really cool. It is a platform that they're building to where eventually anyone's going to be able to do it. So it's not they have you heard of STL Tones by any
Of
chance?
course, yeah.
Okay, so they have Tone Hub, which is like guitar amp plugins, and
Mhm,
then they just created, or I guess in the last couple of years, they created Control Hub, and they have a batch of like legacy producers that started with them. And those are like bigger guys, I would say. And then they're changing their model. Now they have a new batch of people that they've reached out to, and it's a different kind of model. And so I'm able to earn a little bit, which is cool. And the only thing is like I need to make content for that, and I'm not like a super content person. I'm still trying to navigate like how I want to do that, and that where it makes it feel like I'm not just like, "What's up, guys? Like, check out this."
how to
But
do it your way. Yeah.
yeah, I got to do it my way. But I've already launched 15 presets, and it's really been really affirming because like the people that have downloaded it are like using it in their sessions, which is really cool.
Yeah. Control Hub by STL.
By STL Tones, yeah. I'm gonna start releasing more presets as it goes, but probably a little bit more in depth, like some very specific things that I wanna do. I really want them to be good, and I want them to be usable. I don't wanna just do it just for the sake of doing it, but yeah, I'm really stoked about that. It's really cool.
Dude, congrats.
Thank you, man. Yeah,
What are you building now that feels most aligned?
that feels most aligned. It's funny, man, like, some days I'm very motivated to, like, kinda start a label in a sense, which I kinda am doing that already. It's just not, like, super official, as far as, like, when I'm developing artists and kind of executive producing and things like that. But then there's other days where I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to do that. It's like I flip back and forth. I have such a two-part brain. And so I'm trying to like harness one side or the other. But I do love the business side, but I also love the creative side. So I don't know. I'm kind of looking for maybe an opportunity of like bringing in a partner of some sort, or even um, whether that be like on the business side or the creative side, to allow me to kind of swing more one way or the other. So I'm kind of in a little bit of a just a let it come to me mode. Kind of in a little bit of a search mode of just keep my head down, continue to write, get better at my craft, learn more. I'm constantly just trying to learn and get better. I really want to get better um, in the songwriting room, so I'm still a songwriting baby. But um, so aside from that, I'm just trying to build. Honestly, this might not be the musical answer, but I'm just trying to build just a better closeness with my kids, man. We had 3 kids and then we just had twins, and so we have 5 kids. That's, like, a lot of kids, and and it's kinda crazy. It's kinda turned our world upside down a little bit, and it's kinda just reminding me of, like, just the importance of life, and, like, as much as, like, music is important to me, I've been doing it for so long, and my kids are getting older that I'm just also kinda realizing, like, "Man, I really need to pour into my kids." And that's a struggle for a producer because doing anything less than 100% is really hard to succeed. You know what I mean? And you've got a wife and kids and you've got a career, and the man's role is to give all of those things 100% of your time and your effort. And that's tougher to do the more kids you have. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'd love to build a label and independent label that I see the vision of like what a future label looks like, and it's sharing with all the creators on the master side and all those types of things. But then I leave the studio and I go home and I'm like, man, my kids need my attention just as much as music does. And so me and my wife were just talking about like ways to kind of get out of the cycle of dropping kids off, going to school, picking them up, doing dinner, like just like the everyday thing. Because I mean, as you know, like the kids are growing up so quick, and before we know it, they're gonna be on to their own lives, and
Mm.
and I don't wanna look back and be like, man, I only cared about work and I missed that deep relationship. I mean, I have a decent relationship with my parents, but my wife and her parents are super, super close. And I envy that sometimes because I want to be closer with my kids. And so
Mm.
that's the honest answer.
Man, that's such a perfect segue to our last question I had for you.
Nice.
Here it is. If your kids described your career one day, what would you hope they say?
That's good. That's good, man. That's good. That hits a chord because my oldest kid always loved sports, never really wanted to pursue music, but he just recently kind of hit a switch where he was like, I want to be a producer like my dad. And so that's interesting that you asked that. I would say that I think they would say, and I would hope that they said that I gave it all that I had, and that I really loved what I did and that I was grateful to do what I do for a living. I just recently had that talk with my oldest son of like, because when he came to the studio, he's like, "Man, it's so chill here," because he's used to at home there's just chaos, and he's like, "Man, this is really cool that you get to do this," and I'm like, "Yeah, like it is," and it's good to get that reminder sometimes because like when you get too numb to being in the studio and just the work that we do, we hang around people who are famous or whatever, and I've never cared about that. I don't treat anybody differently, and you kind of just forget that until you go out and maybe you go to a show from like one of the artists that you work with and you realize like how many people listen to the songs and you kind of get out of the bubble, and it is nice to kind of get reminded of like how fortunate we are to do this. It could be so much worse. We could have like our job is mentally taxing, but it would be harder to have a physically taxing and a mentally taxing job that a lot of people do. And so
Hmm.
I'm grateful for that. So I really hope that my kids take just the passion that I have for it and just the love that I have for music in general and my constant drive to just get better and to learn. You know what I mean?
Thomas Toner, what a joy, man. It's been such a fun time, like I knew it was going to be. Man, have a great day. Have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, super thankful, man. Appreciate you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thank you, dude.